Welcome to the Acceleration of Connected TV keynote conversation. I'm Andrew Wallenstein, President and Chief Analyst of Variety Intelligence Platform. And I'm excited to explore the current trends and strategies for how to succeed in connected TV and OTT advertising. So let's introduce our panelists. First, we're joined by Audrey Steele, Executive VP of Sales, Research, and Marketing at Fox. Tim Sims, Senior VP of Inventory Partnerships at The Trade Desk, and Christine Cook, Senior VP and Chief Revenue Officer at CNN Digital, a division of Warner Media Ad Sales. Thanks to you all for being with me today. We've got to start this conversation with the pandemic and the unique circumstances it brings to the connected TV and OTT advertising space. I mean, we are seeing incredible growth over these past few months in streaming content over the connected TV platform, probably coming down somewhat, but probably still elevated. So, Audrey, let's start with you. Have you seen sort of a pandemic impact as you study these trends?
Sure. I mean, it's exactly as you said, although it is not limited to digital content. I mean, because everybody's at home, everything that's a comforting pastime or an informational source is up significantly or has been up significantly in the COVID period. What's different is everything has started to normalize. There's, only so much extra television that that an audience can watch, and while you'll see like young demos, kids home from school and that kind of thing are still up. In linear, overall, much of it is tapering off. Different streaming, which was already on a growth trajectory, but let's say it was up in low double digits leading into the pandemic period. That growth rate tripled in the pandemic period. It too is beginning to taper as well, but what I think will be the differentiating factor is that there will be a sustained level of accelerated growth coming out of COVID rather, because you have, introduction to new platforms, development of new habits, and a lot of that stuff is going to stick around. We certainly saw with our own digital platforms at Fox, up on Fox on Hulu, Fox Now, as well as our new streaming platform, Tubi. But what you also see is that a lot of that growth is to non-ad supported streaming platforms. So there's still going to be, a fair amount as the recognition of the desirability of the OTT platform, CTV platform increases. There's still going to be a fair amount of pressure against that inventory because it's just, there is not as much supply as you might think based on looking at the big upsurge in numbers.
Gotcha. So that's a good trend analysis of what's going on the entertainment side. On the news side, Christine, I would imagine CNN on CTV is seeing some tremendous growth.
Absolutely. Through quarantine and because of COVID, CNN worldwide has seen tremendous growth on all modalities, but definitely increase on CTV and OTT for sure. Whether it's up to the minute breaking news, but also the perspective pieces that we offer with documentaries and original digital. I mean, to Audrey's point, we all quarantined in different ways, and many people were quarantining with families. And so you have extended use of every possible device to consume either news and or entertainment throughout the household. And with different appetites and in different age demographics, it has made it for a really interesting increase in consumption. But, across the board, this moment is a boom for content creators, no matter what kind of content you're creating. And that's really exciting from, the art of content creation. And as consumers, we have more and more choices than we've ever had. And, you can watch all of this behavior as to where people want to consume it. And there's definitely a lot of different outputs of our content. And we see consumption up across the board on all of them.
And Tim, you obviously bring a programmatic perspective here. So what's it been like as you're probably watching tremendous growth? What's it on your side of the fence?
Yeah, definitely. And just to give everybody a sense of kind of where the Trade Desk kind of fits in all of this, we're a media buying platform for agencies and brands. And so we see kind of the whole market. And so, brands and agencies will use the Trade Desk to deploy media campaigns and budgets everywhere in the world across, a variety of screens, and CTV is becoming a more and more important screen for the agencies and brands that use our platform to buy media. And I would agree with everything that Audrey and Christine said, in that we're also seeing that same growth in consumption, because we kind of see the whole market through partnerships with folks like Fox and Warner Media. And so as consumers move into connected television, that then generates inventory, and then that inventory generates ad opportunities for advertisers, and all of those come across the transom, so to speak, inside of our platform. And so it's been really interesting to observe the increase in usage across connected television platforms over the last several months. And then I would really agree with what Audrey said, which is that I think what we're also observing is an acceleration of the adoption in connected television platforms. So we conducted a survey back in April of about 2,600 consumers, and for cable TV subscribers, about 11% of those folks said that they were going to cut the cord by the end of the year. And then when you zoom into different demographics, like the younger demographics, 18 to 34, about 18% of those folks said they were going to cut the cord by the end of the year. So normally that kind of trend is in kind of the low single digits. And so I think the survey results that we saw would suggest an acceleration of more people moving into streaming and more people adopting, kind of a streaming first environment.
And so, Audrey, why don't you sort of pick back up where you left off? Because there's with this tremendous growth, there are challenges, I would assume, in how to capitalize on that growth, how to make brands get their money's worth in connected TV.
I think that the difficulty for us has been in communicating the totality of the contribution, particularly in entertainment, where much of our digital inventory sits, communicating the totality of the audience contribution of digital, and OTT is, 75% of our overall digital inventory. In part, it's because there are a few transparent measurement tools that enable, planning tools that are sort of an industry view into individual publishers. We, of course, have our own internal tools, and we do as good a job as we can communicating what the total value of the audience is, in that there's very little overlap. It's largely incremental. To reach the total Fox fan base, there's the linear audience, but the digital audience is largely incremental. As I said, it's a significantly younger audience, and that's of particular value in OTT, not just because it's targetable and addressable, depending on yours. We use Hulu to have that inventory be addressable, but also because it is an environment where, think about how few environments where you can reach a substantially young audience to be able to tell long form brand stories, meaning 15 and 30-second ads, in immersive long form content. There's lots of short form content that reaches young people, but getting people into a high impact brand safe environment is a really actually valuable and rare thing. So I think that there's certainly an increased appreciation for all of the benefits, the sort of best of both world benefits of OTT being sort of a bridge between digital and linear, but to be able to sell it to the degree that it actually contributes to our audience is still something of a challenge, in part based on measurement.
Christine, are you seeing same? And you also have sort of a similar setup where there's the linear and the OTT opportunity side by side at your company.
Yeah, OTT is really interesting because we have a lot of linear investment people who really lean in and do a really nice job of extending, as Audrey said, incremental audiences. But then you also have an appetite from digital pure play buyers and investment teams who understand all of the incremental benefits that are more like advertising on a website with better addressability, etc. So we see a lot of opportunity there. Quite honestly, I wish more people would, and it sounds like they're going to, because all the trades are definitely buzzing about increased interest in CTV and OTT, but the more brands that we have there, the better, quite honestly, because the consumption is intense when, particularly within our world, people will turn on or tune in to CNN and they're there for a while. So we have room for a big variety of advertisers, as opposed to just having a few brands in which case we start to run into frequency cap issues, and or also the bigger array of brands that come in, the more creativity we can bring to bear. You know, one of the things that we're incredibly proud of within Warner Media at CNN is Courageous, our branded content studio. And Courageous produces bespoke pieces for our clients, which range anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes, all the way up to like 20 minutes. And over the past couple of years, we've done some really interesting things on behalf of our partners. One that comes to mind was a project we did with Procter & Gamble about 2 years ago, and they did, I think it was about a 25-minute branded content piece, and we saw tremendous completion rate on OTT as compared to social or other places. And it shouldn't come as any surprise, right? It's the mindset. This thing gets delivered and is measured more like digital, but the consumer frame of reference is way more like TV. So, we've had significant growth both in audiences, as we've talked about, but also in brands coming, and there's room for more.
And so, Tim, what do you think needs to be better understood for the advanced ad industry to become a better mainstream tool for brands?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, it's conversations like this, right? I think there's a lot of education that we need to continue to do in the market about just what's happening and how all the, kind of trends are evolving. We talk about it all the time in kind of the ad industry and in kind of this inside baseball world, but we got to continue to have these conversations in forums like this so that we can keep talking about what's happening in the market and how that impacts brands and content owners. One of the themes that we talk about a lot internally for folks that use our platform is just this concept of bridging these two worlds, right? I think we're kind of past this point where it's like, hey, is CTV going to happen? Like it's happening for sure. Like we're in it right now. And so how do we, as kind of, in our position as kind of partners to brands and agencies, how do we help them bridge those two worlds? Because of course our clients and the folks that use our platform, of course they're advertising in linear as well, but how do we help them find incrementality? How do we help them manage their frequency holistically inside of the digital world, which includes CTV? And honestly, those are some of the big conversations that we're having and some of the drivers of why people move into CTV, right? Because they can manage frequency a little bit better. They can get some of the great things that come with digital. So a lot of the targeting that can happen. I can use my audience if I'm an advertiser and point that at the television screen. That's a huge advancement in marketing for brands and advertisers. And then lastly, the incrementality that we all talked about, where you do have, millions of people now that you can't reach on linear TV. And that's really important for brands. And so the more of these conversations and the more education that we can have and the more standardization that we can create around those bridges, I think is going to help perhaps get us to a point where the kind of media allocation, so the budget allocation for brands, is a little bit more reflective of where all the eyeballs are today.
And just staying on this point of incrementality, I mean, bottom line, is there a measurable lift in additional engagement for ads?
I just spoke, but Audrey, Kristen, I don't know if you want to take that.
Who,
but,
me?
I'm happy to. But
You're allowed to speak twice, Tim. It's okay.
Yeah, okay. I didn't want to capitalize.
Tim says
yes,
yes.
There is. But yes, there is. there is measurable impact, and that's part of the beauty of connected television is that it does connect to all of our other things digital. And so you can have a digital exposure that happens on a connected television screen that you can then link to an online or offline purchase. And so like there are really amazing advancements that just, I think speak a lot to the efficiency and effectiveness of CTV that's possible in all other forms of digital as well. And that's just as true in CTV.
Christine, could you offer an example of like a successful OTT-driven campaign, maybe something that combines some linear?
Yeah, well, I would say success as the high bar of success that I hope. There are a few, but there's some of these challenges. But, success broadly, for the last 2 years, we've sold hand in hand with our linear counterparts and extended our clients when they were buying on broadcast into our OTT inventory, particularly around contextual alignment or tentpole issues where there was content and they wanted to surround it. And there's a couple of agencies that we've worked with that have really leaned into us on that. I mentioned the Procter & Gamble campaign to you. I think they really understood. They were that was in the mode of experimentation. They were really pushing for a longer narrative and branded content to complement standard, buy my product ads into more purpose-driven, which we know this same demographic the same demographic that Audrey was talking about, for whom they're not going to have cable, they're going to be a cord cutter. We also know that they put their money around brands for whom they align on purpose and intent. And so to have the confluence of those two things come together, there's another example with Charles Schwab, who also, when working with Courageous, has been producing narratives that align with, you know, their purpose for the company, and those have on all of the research that we've conducted, you know, really outperformed. And both of those clients, Charles Schwab and P&G, continue to come back and work with us. So, you know, for us in our media plans, we start with saying, here's all the places that our audiences are around the content that you want to reach, and they all have that same attention. Don't judge them differently because one person might be, you know, in a classic linear way, another person might be on their phone, and another person might be choosing CNN on Roku. They still have that same attention that you want, and the potential to engage, as Tim was saying, really elevates that inventory.
Audrey, you know, sitting where you sit at sort of the research side, you're studying the analytics. I mean, from what I understand, measurement in this connected TV space is not sort of where it needs to be. So how do you fill the gap? Do you have sort of an analytic sort of readout that you're able to really guide brands with?
I mean, I think that we all as publishers are working towards providing tools both that are specific to, you know, our portfolio, as well as, you know, the major publishers are working with different industry bodies, SIM, the ANA, the ARF, you know, to develop tools that can be a holistic view into cross-screen measurement, overlaps, incrementality, you know, frequency management, et cetera. I mean, certainly a big part of the issue is, while there is increased visibility, there is such a, you know, a complicated set of tools, data sets, you know, platforms, et cetera, that we all use individually. And again, it gives each of us what we believe to be greater, you know, good visibility into how the platforms work with each other, and what they, you know, what they deliver incrementally, or certainly what OTT delivers incrementally to linear, not just in terms of reach, you know, sort of your basic but very important audience metrics, but in terms of actual value. But we are increasingly in a position, I think, where we need, you know, there's an expectation around, so, you know, what Tim was talking about in terms of advancing audience buying, you know, we lack tools that help our clients more broadly understand the benefit of those kinds of buys to their base, you know, linear large buys. And I think until we get there and we give both basic and more complex, you know, effectiveness metrics in a way that feels more like what we're accustomed to, standardized, you know, unified, we may never get there. But there's, you know, because there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of movement in the other direction of lots of very individualized tools and very individualized currencies within each of the agencies that stand out as, you know, agency branding in some way. So we may not actually get there, but so many of our clients are accustomed to, you know, the standardization that is buying television, you know, the idea of currency being this unified, transparent thing, that I think that the lack of that in terms of, you know, of audience buying is a detriment, or, you know, is holding it back, is a hurdle that we have to clear to actually have it accelerate in terms of the way that our clients buy. There are definitely data-driven clients who buy this way, but our larger clients buy that way in fairly small slivers. There's a lot of lip service to buying differently, but not necessarily a lot of activity.
Tim, do
Yeah, I think
you
it's a
see there
mindset shift.
being,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, you're probably anticipating what I was going to ask. I mean, do you see there being some sort of complexity challenge here?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of complexity, which I'll come back to in just a second. But I think also it's really just a mindset shift, right? Because if you kind of look back at the history of TV advertising, the overwhelming majority of TV advertising for decades and decades has been done across two different vectors, which is age and gender. And now we have to figure out how to kind of evolve our thinking of audience. Because if I'm an advertiser or I'm a brand, my data, like what I understand about my customer, is really valuable to me. And brands these days are spending just an enormous amount of time and effort and money to understand their audiences, right? They're hiring data scientists, they're licensing data management platforms and all of these things so they can understand their audience. And their ability to take that, all that hard work that I just described, and point that at the television screen is one of the biggest advancements that's ever happened in marketing. And so we have to just readjust our thinking around audience. However, with that, as Audrey pointed out, comes a little bit of complexity, and we have to figure out how to normalize and bridge those two worlds. Because of the way that the distribution works in connected television, it's not as clean as it is in linear. You know, it's just a little bit different. Even Audrey's example earlier of kind of Fox content on Hulu. Like, okay, so that's Fox content, but it's in a different distribution vehicle. Fox, of course, now owns Tubi TV. They distribute content there. And so it's just a slightly different landscape, which I've categorized in the past as these two kind of parallel forces that have been occurring over the last couple of years, which is content consolidation, as evidenced by everybody here today with Warner Media and AT&T, of course, and then obviously with Fox and Tubi and some of the consolidation that's been happening around the content world. But then in parallel, distribution fragmentation in the examples that I had before. And so having to think through that from a marketer perspective is, requires a little bit of a different way of thinking than kind of buying, GRPs at an upfront on an annual basis. And so I think it's the greatest thing that's ever happened, as I said before, to marketing, but it is going to require a little bit of rethinking on all of our parts, from a content owner, from a platform perspective, from a brand and marketer perspective, around how we navigate these next couple of years. Because I think on the other side of it, it's going to be an amazing new world that's going to help fund the amazing content that's produced across the Warner Media and Fox portfolio, and it's going to help brands talk to consumers in a more impactful way.
I just wonder how soon that new world actually kicks in. Christine, from your end, is there an old school kind of way of thinking that networks and brands are still trying to get out of?
So, I mean, networks, I think, are leaning, I'm progressively leaning towards this. I mean, you can look at the launch of streaming services that we're all doing, and how publishers understand that their content needs to be in those places and want to be the place that consumers start with, quite speaking plainly, right? We as publishers and content creators have always partnered and had distribution partnerships like we're talking about right now. And we want our fans on those services to be able to access our content, whether it's entertainment or news. Brands now are saying, hey, I know that those audiences are there. I know that they have rabid attention. Oh, and I want 2 frequency cap. I don't want to be by anybody that's in the same category as me. And they have this nice checklist of things that are perfectly fine to ask, perfectly fine, but starts to complicate it when we don't have all the information to know in a digital world where a bunch of different ads or partners could show up in one of our slots, right? And so there's a level of standardization across the ad tech part of the portfolio that we all need to get tighter aligned on. Audrey kind of alluded to it a little bit. Some of that has to do with how we define audiences. So that when we go to reach an audience by whatever way you do, there's some harmony across all of the assets of our brand. The other would be when opportunities to fill pod slots that we have, and an ad comes in, sometimes I don't know who that advertiser is. So I inadvertently could grab an ad and show it, and it is maybe competitive to the one before it, or it could be the same advertiser, and I inadvertently am creating a really crummy consumer experience by like just pounding you with the same, ad to go to the Bahamas or whatever it may be. So understand, like at the beginning of any of our businesses and in the digital component, someone's got an amazing idea, someone's got amazing tech, and they have this little bit of a company, and then the company gets big. And then as we all get a little bit more mainstream, we really need to come together and create harmony so that it's easier for publishers, right? So I'm not in this weird spot of not knowing if a programmatic opportunity comes in, I don't even know who that advertiser is. I need to know who that is. And for the brand to be able to know who they're reaching, in an easy way, so that I can, reach that audience across all my distribution partners and my O&O. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, certainly the Bahamas example hits home. I think we all have seen that kind of thing. Audrey, for you, I mean, that's my pet peeve. What are the challenges top of mind, Audrey, that you think need to be solved for connected TV to be better, for there to be, as Christine put it, more harmony?
I mean, certainly a lot of what is spoken of, in the industry as being, problematic with connected TV. It's interesting. I mean, when we've been in the connected TV business for a decently long time. We've distributed our content on Hulu and our owned and operated platforms for 8+ years, and the talk about transparency and brand safety and that kind of thing has certainly been a preeminent kind of benefit of what we offer on digital platforms. But in very, very recent years, with the big upswing in the availability of additional, AVOD and SVOD platforms and big surge in growth and viewership, there's been a lot of talk about, transparency in the OTT world. And that is, that's mostly around the way that content, it's still, it's long form, FEP content. And so it isn't the same kind of brand safety issues that you might have with other platforms and digital pure plays, but there is a desire by clients to have, visibility into the inventory, to not buy buckets of, of undifferentiated. I mean, audience is clearly important, but content is important to so many clients as well. And when you have this sort of bridge between TV and digital, and in fact, OTT is really just another television platform. It is all TV. There's a desire to have content, control over content visibility into where my brand and ads are running. So that's something that I think, as the industry increasingly addresses it, and certainly we're attempting to address, that we have total visibility into what clients run in on our owned and operated platforms and on Hulu. We're doing the same now with Tubi that we do with those. I mean, and other issues are, of course, around frequency management, is a big issue and complaint, and a difficult thing to solve in an automated fashion. But we're with Tubi, we just had our Tubi Newfront yesterday, and announced a frequency management tool for Tubi across the platforms where buyers might buy it. So that's addressing, a fairly major hurdle from their standpoint. And then again, not to beat this drum overly, but the ability to prove incrementality and to prove the additional audience benefit, and the fact that the premium price that you pay for OTT is delivering you TV audience that that you would pay TV prices for. Clients pay television premiums in large part for reach, for the guarantee of reach and immediacy. And knowing, there's been tons of talk in this current environment about OTT as a reach replacement, having the proof of that being the case, above and beyond buys, I think will go a long way to, to having clients more deeply participate on these platforms.
I just want to add on to something that Audrey said, because I think it is an important point, because price does come up. And, there is the intent when you end up with a consumer that's on connected TV on OTT. You're pretty intentful. Like, this isn't usually you just like flip it on and it's there. Like, when people path to get to any one of these content experiences, you have their attention. They really got there. And so I think that there is a value that we still, and I love that Audrey uses the term value. There is real value to unlock here, and reach, and attribution. And so we should be mindful that we don't inadvertently, undermine further growth or minimize that value by extending, just by default price, because I think that there is often this extra intent and focus and incredible value there.
Well, we certainly
Agreed.
touched on a lot of issues here. We could keep going. There's a lot of complexity, but we're going to call it a day. want to give a thank you to our panelists and also to our viewers today. We hope you stay tuned for Variety's Virtual TV Fest.